go now to Melbourne. We'll take a look at the inner city electorate of Kooyong. It's the Treasurer Josh Frydenberg's electorate. He's facing a challenge from independent candidate Monique Ryan, though, who's out on the campaign trail today and has been good enough to join us. Thanks very much for your time. I know every moment is precious in campaigns. You are campaigning in part on a National Integrity Commission. For how many of your voters do you think this is a number one issue, though?
Look, I think that the National Integrity Commission is a really important issue for the people of Kooyong. It and climate change are the two things that people are telling us that they care about most when we talk to them on the streets of the electorate.
Okay, so you think 1 and 2, Integrity Commission, climate change. I'll get to climate in a moment. Some concerns, though, about how a National Integrity Commission might mirror New South Wales ICAC. And the example often given, if there's an investigation into the Prime Minister and they are called to give public evidence, do you think realistically in that situation a Prime Minister of the day would just have to step down, resign, even before a verdict's handed down? And do you see that as problematic?
Well, no, I don't think that that is a particularly significant issue. I think that realistically the Prime Minister, like any other member of the community, should be answerable for his or her actions in the same way that any of the rest of us would be. I'm not sure that we'd need to go so far as to say that that person might need to resign from their position. I do think that the question of an integrity commission is really important to people, and that people have real concerns about the lack of transparency shown by the current government in many facets of its activities. And the fact that the government has obfuscated on this to the extent that it has, that it clearly promised us an integrity commission prior to the last election, but has now backtracked on that and is now becoming really quite defensive and aggressive in the way that it talks about it, reflects the fact that this government knows what an integrity commission might find. And that's one of the concerns that people have, is that our government is not being upfront about.
Yeah, and so that's for the government today to answer that, and we're continuing to question them. But just on what you would back, we just saw Gladys Berejiklian step down once there was this public inquiry announced, partly because of the uncertainty that hang over her job. Wouldn't that also happen to a Prime Minister of the day, and do you see that as a problem?
Well, I think in the situation in New South Wales, the Premier stepped down because of clear and obvious concerns about the way that she had comported herself. If the Prime Minister of the country behaved in a similar fashion, in a way that was open to that sort of questioning, then they should have to answer those questions.
Well, she resigned, though, because once there was an investigation, she didn't think it was tenable. That's why she didn't admit to any wrongdoing. So would that be what a Prime Minister of the day would have to do once there was a public inquiry announced?
I think you're getting a little bit ahead of yourself in that respect. I think that the Prime Minister of the day should be responsive to the Australian population and to an ICAC if we had one of those, and I think we would have a better government if we did, in the same way that any member of the population should be. Okay.
Climate, the other one you mentioned. So you are suggesting a 60% emissions reduction policy by 2030. Labor's is 43, the government's is 26 to 28 with a 35% target. Does that mean on this policy, for now, your default would be to support Labor over the coalition?
No, not at all. My default position would be that I'm open to negotiating with either major party. We're in a position where a person or a part of a group of people with the balance of power after the next federal election, that I would negotiate with either of the major parties in order to prosecute the things that matter to me and which the people of Kooyong have elected me for, which is effective action on climate change. At this point, neither of the major parties has come to the table in the same way that the people of Kooyong want them to, which is to take action in a much more effective way against climate change. And so I would negotiate with both of the major parties in order to achieve that result.
So negotiate, fair enough, but as you know, within the crossbench, you don't get your own policies, you try to get influence on them. You mentioned National Integrity Commission and climate. On those two areas, can you point to any aspect of the coalition's policies you prefer over Labor's?
Well, I mean, I think the coalition has previously said that they would support an integrity commission. The fact that they haven't done that to date is a great disappointment.
No, but their model versus Labor's model, what we know about the two. On national integrity, what model do you prefer from what we know of the two?
I don't think that either of the major parties at this point, whether we talk about climate change or we talk about an integrity commission, is acting in a strong enough or active enough way. But particularly in terms of climate change, the current government's action on that and the degree to which it's backhacked on an integrity commission have really disappointed the electorate. That's why I'm getting the support that I am receiving from the people of Kooyong, because they do want effective action on those two things.
Right, but those two things, again, if we compare the two policies, I understand what you say about wanting to negotiate, but Labor says it will legislate for a National Integrity Commission this year before December. It wants public inquiries, which you want as well. It has a higher emissions reduction policy.
I do.
As the two parties' policies stand right now, your policies are more in line, or your desires are more in line with Labor's.
Oh, look, you could say that, but in fact, I don't think the Labor Party's policies are enough as yet either. I don't think that either of the two major parties have come to the table to the extent that people want them to do, and that is...
No, but you're closer to Labor than the coalition on those two areas.
It's all or none, though. For me to support either major party to guarantee supply after the next federal election, I'm absolutely adamant it is not negotiable that we need more effective action on climate change. And so it doesn't matter if you're talking about more,
but what does that mean? So unless a party says 60%,
a minimum of
60% or nothing?
Minimum of 60%.
Before you... OK.
That's the starting
What about 60%, while you're starting on that, what would that cost to the economy? Which jobs would it see maybe go in some sectors? Is there any work you can point to on that?
Oh, look, I don't think this is something that's going to cost the economy at all. I don't agree with that at all. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to reap the benefits of a transition to increased use of renewables in our economy. We're going to have the world's cheapest power that we will obtain from wind and solar and from renewables there. We will reap the economic benefit of engagement in green hydrogen, green steel, ammonia, of increased mining of nickel and cobalt and local extraction and processing of those. We're going to have a huge ability to benefit from the incredible wind and solar supplies that we have in this country. It's not going to cost us. We are going to leapfrog off the back of this to become an energy superpower in this region.
But the cost is up for debate, that ultimately renewables will be seen to be cheaper, and they are in certain areas, but if you went to 100% renewables tomorrow, it would cost a lot of money. So it's where that band lies. You said, I don't think at the start of that.
No one's talking about going to 100% renewables tomorrow.
No, but
that
my
transition
point is
has to happen over 5 to 10 years, and the Australian government has to be supported through it. The current government
But what can you point to that in terms of that 60%?
Needed to.
In terms of that 60% target by 2030, what can you point to? What work has been done on how that would change the economy, what job areas it might hurt, what cost there might be?
A huge amount of work has been done in this area by groups like ARENA and the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. If you look at the modelling that's been in Zali Steagall's Climate Change Act to date, there's a huge amount of the AEMO and the work that they've done. There's been a huge amount of work done to demonstrate the economic potential of a rapid transition to increased use of renewables.
But specifically on a 60%
it's just not true
and what
to
that
say
might cost.
Yeah, it's all there. Look, if you look at those sources, all the work for that has been done.
What is it? So sorry, what does it say? I mean, how many jobs? There's a real problem
with the current government. It's always pushing back. Well, I think if you're talking about jobs in specific industries, you have to look at specific industries and the details thereof. But if we come back to first principles, essentially what the current government is saying is that a transition to increased use of renewables is going to cost us. And that language is unhelpful because it engenders anxiety in people who feel that the transition to use of renewables is something that's going to hurt their back pocket. That is not the fact. In fact, that transition is going to be of great economic benefit to this country. And we need to embrace that and carry people forward knowing that they are going to be supported through that transition in an appropriate way.
a big debate around your sort of political allegiances. You've described yourself as a clean skin previously, but you were a member of the Labor Party for 3 years until 2010. At what point do you consider you stopped supporting the Labor Party?
Look, I've been very clear about this. I stopped supporting the Labor Party because, well, I initially supported the Labor Party because I thought Kevin Rudd was going to take action on climate change, which he described as the greatest threat to our generation, and I agreed. And I left the Labor Party in 2010 with great frustration with both the Labor Party and the Greens about the ineffective approach to what I think is the greatest threat to our economy and to our environment.
So
and
left,
since
yeah.
that time
So
I've
just a
been
bit short on
swinging
time.
vote,
So
as
left
many
in
people have.
Left in 2010, but there's a series of tweets,
22.
even 5 years after that, of support for Julia Gillard, for Tanya Plibersek. It still seemed were you supporting them and not the Labor Party? What's your explanation
Yeah, look,
for
I
that?
think. Well, look, I think my opponent has mined my social media fairly effectively, but he has cherry-picked things that support his own narrative. The reality is, if you look at my social media, if you look at the conversations I've had with many people over the years, there's lots of people from all sides of the political spectrum for whom I have admiration and respect, and that continues to be the case.
And they included Tanya Plibersek, Julia Gillard, pretty central figures at that time in a Labor government.
Yes, I've also had lots of respect for members of the Liberal Party and of other people of other political stripes as well. I'm an independent thinker who is
Were there any supports for the coalition
person, and I have lots
at that time, though?
Yes, there would have been. Yes, for sure. I mean, we're talking about the Liberal National Party having mined a very old social media account of mine and taken out the things which suit their own narrative. They've not mined the things that didn't. And yes, there would have been support for all sorts of people of all sorts of political stripes in that old social media account.
Let me ask you finally, transparency, a big part of your campaign. How much has your campaign accepted from Climate 200 in terms of funding?
Yeah, look, transparency is a big part of the campaign, and one of the concerns that people in Kooyong have is the concerns around political donations. If we look at the donations of $2.8 million to the Kooyong 200 fund that Mr Frydenberg has received in the last 5 years, hasn't declared $1 of donations to that fund, and that is a concern to the people of Kooyong. In my case, I've had more than 2,000 donors to the campaign. Climate 200 is just a single donor, and they've contributed less than a third of the funds that we've received to date.
How much is that?
I will be complying with all of the AEC rules around. It's less than a third of the funds to date. We're looking at a total budget of around about $1 million for the campaign. But I will be complicit with all of the AEC guidelines around donating.
So about 300,000 or so
as I need to.
from Climate 200, give or take.
I couldn't tell you exactly the dollar number to date, but yeah, it's about a third. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Monique Ryan, it's a busy time.
If you compare that with the amount of money that my opponent has spent on the donation on the campaign to date, you'll see that it's a very small fraction of that.
Okay. Monique Ryan, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
That's a pleasure. Thank you.